The charges that I levied against the council member was count 1. On July 19, 2016, Councilman Welch sent a letter to the Riverside County Grand Jury in response to their 2016 report. The letter was authorized by unanimous direction given by council, without there being any dissent on record by any council member. In the letter, Councilmember Welch implied that the City of Banning will no longer conduct business via undocumented handshake agreements. However, only 9 months later, Welch engaged in yet another handshake agreement, this time for brush removal to the benefit of a private business, i.e. Diamond Hills Chevrolet. In the council meeting of May 22, 2018, Welch is on video stating that just because he signed the letter, this does not mean he agreed with it. This means Welch intentionally misled the grand jury into believing that he as mayor, as well as the city, fully agree with the grand jury's recommendation that handshake agreement shall no longer be used in Banning, when in fact he had every intention to continue the practice. At a very minimum, Welch had an ethical obligation to formally express his dissent with the response, not only to the grand jury, but also to the public. Welch failed to do so, not only when the response was formulated, but also at the time he signed the letter. This violated the ethical standards set forth in Section 9.10 of the Manual of Procedural Guidelines of the City of Banning, which reads, "A member of a legislative body shall maintain the highest ethical standard and shall adhere to all laws and the ordinances and regulations of the city in carrying out their duties." Count 2, violation of ethics, giving direction to city manager without knowledge or consent of the city council. In their 2018 report, the grand jury found that Councilman Welch directed the city manager, then Michael Rock, to provide brush clearing services for Diamond Hills Chevrolet. This is believed to have occurred in March of 2017. Welch gave the direction as a single council member without knowledge or consent of the rest of the council. In the council meeting of May 22nd, Welch is on video stating that he never gave direction, but merely made a suggestion. However, Welch's denial deserves no consideration as it is irrelevant under the law. The grand jury's investigation into the matter lasted for over 9 months and included the testimony of 9 witnesses, including Rock and Welch. With their report, the grand jury has acted as a finder of fact. The factual finding of the grand jury was that Welch indeed gave direction to the city manager. Pursuant to Section 11.9 of the Manual of Procedure, the Banning City Council must, not may or should, consider legally mandated findings applicable to a matter. Such findings include those of a grand jury. Therefore, this section mandates that the council frame their decision solely based on the factual findings of the grand jury. They must not consider their denial by Welch. It was unethical for Welch to use his position as mayor and throw his weight around by directing a staff member, in this case the city manager himself, without first consulting the rest of the city council. Welch violated the ethical standards as set forth in Section 9.10 of the Manual of Procedural Guidelines of the City of Banning. His actions also went against the spirit and intent of the City Ordinance 2.08.110, which specifically prohibits council from micromanaging staff. In a council session of April 11, 2017, Welch is on video admitting wrongdoing. He said, "Did we go around the idea of bringing it to council to get a project like that approved? Probably." I herewith move the council to censure Art Welch. What I want to do is to introduce evidence, and I want to play the excerpts of Councilmember Welch. So this one,
Being from you, Art?
Really wouldn't do for me to say too much. I guess I'm the one that needs to be blamed for this whole situation. I'm the one that started the firestorm because indeed thought we were, thought I was doing something that was helpful to one of our major businesses in town, but evidently not.
then we have Welch saying that he went around council.
Did we go around the idea of bringing it to the council to get a project like that approved? Probably.
So we have a lot of dissension, or this one is Art saying that he signed the letter to the grand jury.
Quickly, those documents that I signed back to the grand jury. When you are the mayor, you are committed to sign for the majority vote of a council. That doesn't mean you agree with it.
In 2010, Debbie Franklin was on the council, and she didn't agree with the letter that went to the grand jury, and therefore Debbie Franklin dissented and sent her own letter. So I want to be clear that Welch is not being charged with making a handshake deal. Why? Because there is no ordinance or policy against it, at least not yet, as required in Section 10.5 of the Manual of Procedures. Welch denies directing the city manager. Is this significant? Absolutely not. It's completely irrelevant. Section 11.9 says decisions of the legislative body when acting as a quasi-adjudicative body in public hearings should be framed in terms of findings of fact, potentially relevant conclusions of law, and ultimate decisions showing the basis for the decision and the nexus between the findings, the conclusions, and the decision. The legislative body members must consider any legally mandated findings applicable to a matter and consider the evidence presented to them in light of such findings in their decision. The grand jury is a finder of fact. That is their job. And part of that is finding wrongdoing or probable cause for wrongdoing. 11.9 says the legislative body must consider the grand jury's factual findings. It does not say may or should, and it leaves no room for interpretation or discretion. 11.9 makes Councilmember Welch's objection irrelevant. Based on Section 11.9, the council cannot deviate from the factual finding by the grand jury which says he directed the city manager. That is a fact. A censure by the council means a disapproval of Welch's actions. It is strictly an administrative procedure that has absolutely no consequences except a notation in the individual's file and an entry in the city's official record. If the council fails to censure Welch, then they are giving their approval to everything he has done, even though his actions led to a grand jury report that found malfeasance. If the council fails to censure Welch, they are condoning lawlessness in the city of Banning. Is this the image we want as a city? I don't believe it is. And I'll rest for now.
Do you have any witnesses that you'd like to present?
No.
Then, Mr. Welch, you may rebut.
And the guidelines set forth on situations like this, once a charge is made, the recipient of the charge has 7 days to respond. I indeed did that. responding to mayor, all city council members, the city manager, and our city attorney. I'm going to read my rebuttal letter on both charges and then invite one of my witnesses to come forward. Count 1 was a violation of ethics, deceptive letter to grand jury. In response to that, there is no deceptive letter to my knowledge. In response to this charge, on July 19th, 2016, the City Council sent a letter to the Riverside Grand Jury stating handshake agreements will no longer be honored. The City Council was unanimous in their vote on this issue. As mayor at the time, I signed the letter. The mayor is obligated to do this, even if there has been a simple majority vote. There was no deception. I agreed with the letter. My statement in the May 22, 2018 meeting had nothing to do with the signed letter dated July 19, 2016. My statement was in the context of stating that the mayor, who signs all documents for the council, has an obligation to represent the majority vote of the council. The quote of the charged document, quote, does not mean he agreed with it, is taken totally out of context involved of the decision on May 22nd, 2018. I fully agree with the contents of the letter dated July 19, 2016. On count 2, violation of ethics, giving direction to the city manager without knowledge or consent of the city council in response to this charge. I've been accused of verbally directing the city manager to take an action. It's surprising that the findings of the grand jury do not name an individual in their report back to us. Relating to the charge that I engaged in a handshake agreement with the local business is not true, nor did I direct any staff member, including the sitting manager, to do so. Being approached by a local business asking for help to complete a project, I stated to them I was not familiar with the process to do the project. I stated I would ask the city manager to contact them. I did. All correspondence from that point was between the city manager and our staff. In relation to the statement of the grand jury report, I stated on May 22nd, 2018, my objection to the term, quote, directed, and hope that would be noted in our response to the grand jury. As a city council member, I'm obligated to work at the highest standard in representing the city and also obligated to present the comments, questions, and concerns from our residents and business owners. At no time have I compromised that commitment and obligation, and I'm saddened by these charges.
Okay, you said you wanted to bring a witness up.
I'm sorry?
You have a witness?
I have a gentleman I think would like to speak to the situation because it involves his company.
Please come forward.
Good evening, residents. Good evening, council. My name is Bob Knight. I'm the dealer operator and general manager of Diamond Hill Chevrolet. Mr. Alam Khan is the sole proprietary owner of the dealership. When we first came to Banning and saw the opportunity being tremendous to benefit this city with employment, increased vehicle sales, increased tax revenue, we stood there and realized we needed to purchase that lot on the freeway. I purchased a lot of components from Ray's RV, struck up a conversation. Next thing I know, we're buying 1.5 acres for Banning for almost $800,000. That's a large investment to someone who'd owned a dealership for less than 6 weeks. Knowing it was imperative for our growth that we anticipate, it was a necessary purchase. We went along with that purchase. Upon closing escrow and never having experience with Caltrans, I simply met with the city manager and I asked for some guidance with the Community Development Center to assist me in getting the proper permits. I was advised by the previous property owner, we usually just send a gentleman over the wall to cut the weeds. It's no big deal here. I was not going to be a general manager of a facility working very diligent with the city schools, the city
Bob,
parks.
excuse me.
Yes, sir.
No, wait, I'm sorry. He's
So
But
what
this
I
is
did-
irrelevant to the charges.
No, let
So
him
what I
speak,
did is,
and then
and,
he can ask.
and Don, I will get to the end, and I set out to make it very clear to the city management and everyone that I was not about to set out and do something wrong. So I asked for the proper procedures to be followed. Assist me with Caltrans. Mr. Arturo Villa, very helpful, but we being in the car business, we live 1 hour at a time. Government agencies are 6 months to a year at a time. I get very impatient, and so did Mr. Alam Khan that had an $800,000 investment. 4 months into it, my weeds were getting even taller, and no one could see my $2.9 million worth of inventory that I had sitting on the freeway to help me sell it to generate tax revenues. I would leave phone messages to find out how are we doing with Caltrans. I need to find someone so that I need a permit so I could hire someone to go over there and cut these weeds. So I expressed my dissatisfaction to the city tremendously, to Mr. Michael Rock, to George, to Art, to Debbie. I would say, I need why is this process so long to get a permit? I don't care what things cost. You don't spend $800,000 on 1.5 acres in Banning and give a you-know-what that it might cost you $7-8 grand to cut the weeds. I don't care. I got cars to sell. So I was very forthcoming to say, I need help with the permit. And here we are. And the grand jury, this is the first time I've even known of this. Grand jury didn't call me. I'm the one that had all the communication. Nobody's picked up the phone and asked me the truth. The truth is I'm a business owner in this town trying to generate a tremendous amount of taxes, and I would under no circumstance, and anyone who's done business with me for my 40 years would ever ask for some form of financial benefit or assistance when I'm trying to generate tax dollars for this community. And I find out about this, nobody's talked to me. Grand jury's never called me. Nobody on this council has ever called me. And our name is being run through like we had a handshake deal. I don't shake people's hands to get things done. I asked for assistance to get a permit so that once that permit is issued, I could hire someone to cut those weeds. And here we are. So that's what I have to say. Any questions?
No. You want to comment?
And we're spending
If you
a
have a
lot of
question
money.
of the witness, it's
No, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add to his comment, is what I'm going to do.
I think he's already had his, help me out here, sir.
No, because what
No,
you've
just
done is, wait a minute, no, you wait a
You've been
minute.
talking, just let me check
This
with the
is-
city. Let me talk to the city attorney.
Don't point your finger at me.
Just be quiet for a
Put it in your
minute.
pocket.
Just be quiet till I get an opinion from the city attorney. Go ahead, sir.
The procedures provide that members of the public can comment. After all members of the public can comment, the council can discuss.
Okay,
I would suggest you continue with any other public comment.
thank you. Do you have anything else to say, sir?
I have no further comments, and we
Thank you.
continue to want to provide business and jobs for this community.
Open it up to put the rest of the public comment now?
Boy, I hope nobody's watching this on TV. What a joke. Again, a dog and pony show. Mention 3 people, the 3 problems in this town, I feel. Welch, Moyer, and Franklin. Always in dirty deals, always making our town look bad. Why don't we have business here? If I was watching this on TV and saw what you people were doing, I wouldn't touch this town with a 10-foot pole. You need to grow up. When you make a mistake, you need to admit you made a mistake. And you need to quit using the people and abusing the people. It's sickening to see what goes on with this body in this town.
Linda Pippinger, resident of Banning. I believe that when the grand jury comes down with a suggestion, whatever verdict, whatever the correct term would be, I believe that the council has the obligation to abide by that. I have tremendous respect for the law and the grand jury. I would be terrified if anything was ever called to their attention that I had done. And I believe that the integrity of this city depends on going along with what the grand jury ruled.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I think what I want to say is I want to talk about the importance of the grand jury, the purpose of the grand jury, and the functioning of the grand jury. You hear the term grand jury, and I imagine people who aren't lawyers and haven't been involved in the system. Imagine a courtroom where there's a jury sitting there, and they're asking questions of Mr. Welch to come up with their conclusions, and Mr. Welch has counsel, and Mr. Welch has the opportunity to cross-examine people, and Mr. Welch has the opportunity to put on his own evidence. None of that happens in a grand jury. The grand jury meets. They ask the questions that they think they need. They follow the facts as they find them. And then they issue not a ruling, they're not really a jury, they issue a recommendation. You are actually the finders of fact as to how to proceed with those recommendations. Important function. I mean, these people spend a lot of time. I give them actually a tour every year for one of the facilities they come and do every year, because they are required to actually look at every single government agency in the county during the year. Now, they pick the ones to write reports on. They don't write reports on every single one, but they actually meet with them all. It's an amazing thing they do. And what they do is they try to say, we've found a problem. We think you, the people who have the legal obligation and ability to solve that problem, should do something. And here's our suggestion of what we think the problem is, and here's our suggestion of things we think you should do. Sometimes the legislative body agrees with those decisions, and sometimes they don't, because that's what the law provides. The law provides that you don't have to agree with them. Now, should you, though, respect what they're saying? Absolutely. Should you admit that there's a problem that needs to be solved? Absolutely. And you need to come up with that solution, and their suggestions might be something for you to look at. But this is not a Perry Mason trial where there's cross-examination, both sides put on their facts. That's not what happens in a grand jury. This is the first and only time that Art has been able to put on testimony. Now, you can either agree. Now, as the people listening to testimony, you now have to decide what's credible. which story seems more credible, just like a jury does. This is not the first time the city's had this problem. When Art went to the city manager, should the city manager have brought it all to you? Maybe. I don't know, because you know he has certain dollar amounts that he can do without you. Should the city manager had followed the previous thing and had a written contract all in place? Oh, absolutely. So that's something I know you guys are working on. I know you still haven't done, though. And maybe it should be put higher on the priority list so that we don't get in these positions again, because Mr. Ellis is right. We don't look good. We need to look like a professional body that knows what they're doing and encourages businesses to come here. And I hope that through this process, you guys come up with the procedures to do that. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, now I'll bring it back for your comments, Don.
I want to stay on track, and I halfway want to comment on Mr. Knight's comments, but they're really irrelevant. They have nothing to do with the charges at hand. You know, in order to, the findings of the grand jury are the findings of the grand jury. And I might just read the top sentence of their findings. A member of the city council verbally directed the city manager to assist a local auto dealership by trimming the brush along the Interstate 10. It's a finder of fact, and that's what they found. So Welch was not honest in his response to the grand jury. He may now say he agreed with the council's letter to the grand jury, but said otherwise in the previous council meeting. We all heard it on the recording. I played it. It was here. To determine Welch's honesty to the grand jury, it is important to focus on his actions after the letter was sent. Welch made another handshake deal, or at least initiated one. So he sent the letter and then made the deal with the Diamond Hills. We all need to be reminded that to this day, the city had no written agreement with Diamond Hills about the brush clearance. To this day, there's no agreement. That is the nature of a handshake. No record exists. Not even an understanding what it's going to cost. Invoices were only issued after the fact and when the matter became public. Welch is on video admitting he knowingly circumvented the council. He does not dispute that in his response, he knew it was against the rules to go around the council. His statements show a clear intent not to follow the law. And he says, I'm saddened. Yeah, we're all saddened by this, but it does not make it go away. That's it for me.
Debbie, any comments? Daniela?
When this was originally brought forth, that was the first time, because I was one of the ones that was interviewed by the grand jury. And I was under the impression that everybody was interviewed, and that was, at that meeting, I actually found out that it wasn't when it was brought up to the dais. Now I find out that the people that are directly involved in it have not been interviewed either, and you, sir, should have been one of them. So it is a concern, because it seems like that the grand jury did not fully investigate and the report is incomplete. So fact findings, yeah, that's true. But everybody needs to be included. Everybody needs to be interviewed. And Mr. Ellis, you are right. It does, we do look bad, and the city does look bad, and we need to start moving forward in order to start attracting some businesses.
Art, do you have any further comment? Then I'll bring it back for a motion. That's up to you, sir.
Motion to censure Councilmember Welch.
Do I have a second? It dies from lack of a second.
Okay. It was expected.